let's talk about it.
Hello and welcome back to Thicc Radio, the award-winning podcast where we talk about gaining, fetishism, and everything plus size. I'm James.
And I'm Tim.
And I'm Capy, so let's get into it.
Alright, y'all, so we have with us today a series of guests, and we're going to let them introduce themselves.
Hi, I'm Becca. I am a high school Spanish teacher, and I am a feedie.
Hi, I'm Tyler, or merrilyoverfed online, and I'm a university professor. I teach marine biology and evolutionary biology.
Hi, I'm moanappetite on all socials. I'm also called Richie. I am a middle school special education teacher, and I am a gainer.
Hi, my name is Casey. I am a school administrator in Washington, D.C. I would loosely identify as a casual builder.
Well, listen, everyone, welcome to the roundtable conversation. I think we're going to have a lot of fun today. It's funny, when we were talking about this episode, way back at the inception of the podcast, and Tim will reference this from time to time, where he'll say, we're not going to have stuff to talk about forever, are we? And then I sat down and was like, wrong. And then started to pull these concepts out of my ass where I was like, we should have this conversation, we should talk about this. And actually, fat education was one of those initial topics. And it's just kind of been sitting with us for a time where we were like, it's now the moment. Who do we want to talk to about this? So we were actually quite excited to get to sit down with a couple of y'all to chinwag about the experiences of plus-sizedness in the conversation around education. So welcome to today's education conference. We're glad to have you here. Please help yourself to tea and biscuits. They're free on the side. Please, everyone, make sure you take a look at your programs and make sure you go to the correct room for your seating assignment. But listen, we're here to chat. So, to get started, everyone shared with us a bit about what they do in the education space and how they perhaps identify within the community. Let's open it up. In each of yours experiences, how do you find that fat is addressed in education as a topic and point of discussion?
In my experience, it really isn't addressed, and it's really not talked about among professionals, among my colleagues. It's just they're a colleague, and thank God they're an adult and they're breathing in the classroom. So that, I feel like it's more of that's where we are in the US public education system. It's you're an adult, you have a bunch of letters after your name that says you can teach the thing. Good luck. And so body size is not talked about, which is, I view it as a positive thing. It's just, you're just another person.
I think for me on the secondary level, I do have one middle school class as well. It's not coming up as much amongst my colleagues, but it does come up a lot with students. There's a lot of jokes. There's a lot of commentary on people's bodies about big back, about, oh, she's so fat or whatever. So I do have to have a lot of conversations with students around that. But on a professional level, it doesn't really come up as much unless I bring it into conversation.
Yeah, I would second that. I think there's a perception that gainers get approached all the time about how fat they are. And that doesn't happen often in any place I'm in, but also, especially not at work. That would be horrifying if someone approached me about my weight at work. So I just don't think that really, most people are polite and socially aware enough to just not bring it up in a work setting.
I would say from a school administrator standpoint, I spend a lot of my time really combating the toxicity of diet culture amongst my staff and making sure that isn't getting passed along to my students. I would say I'm often the person bringing up the combo that calories are not bad things, right? We don't all have the same view of what we want our bodies to be, and we shouldn't imply that that same desire is true for all of our staff and for all of our students.
It's so funny, Tyler, when you said that, you'd be horrified if somebody brought up your weight at work. And so since working in a school, I haven't had that happen. But when I was working in nursing homes, I would have a janitor sometimes call me out
on it. And one day I came to work and the janitor was like, "You put on some weight, haven't you?" And I was like, like I talked about this in a previous episode, how at the time I was like, "Oh, fuck yeah, it's actually working." But at the same token, it's like it's so awkward when it happens in the workplace. And this is someone that you're going to be seeing for the next 8 hours. But to go back to something that Becca was talking about, about like among your colleagues, when you're encountering older colleagues, people that have been teaching for 30 or 40 or even 50 years by this point, and do they seem kind of set in their ways, or do they seem like open to new methods of teaching or new conversations to be had around weight, body types, self-confidence, self-image, things like that?
I've reached the point in my life where I just don't dance around it as much. So if we're sitting and somebody brings out like a tray of cookies, and a lot of my older colleagues will be like, "Oh, I'm so bad. I can't have that." I will definitely say, "Well, I'm going to have 4. You should probably have one." I just don't play into it, but they are set in their ways. It's very like, "Oh, there's no healthy options today in the cafeteria. I need to make sure I've been so bad. I need to this." And I just don't tolerate it. I don't know why they like dance around it with me. Because I'm like, you can tell I'm fat. So I don't understand why you're so afraid of getting fat. And it's like clearly I am. So
Well, and you bring up something very important, Becca, which is like it's significant to, in some cases, to lead by example, right? Sometimes the situation doesn't seem as grave if an adult in the room doesn't address it as something dire or scary, right? It helps put other adults in the room at ease, right?
definitely.
I have a question if people are fine with this. Are you seeing that the demographic of folks in your schools is changing towards being more capable of handling this conversation?
I see it like I'm one of the big ish people in my building, and it's like it's not even really talked about, and into like Becca's like line of like I'll have 4 cookies. Like I'm not gonna be the one that like is first in line, because I'm like I'm gonna let someone else do that, because social pressure and anxiety, it's like, oh my god, all eyes are on me. It's once like 1 or 2 people go, then I'm gonna go load up my plate, because I'm like, A, free food. I'm a teacher, god knows I need the free food. B, dinner or lunch, whatever it may be. I'm like, I didn't have to pack anything, so yeah, you better bet I'm loading up. But having those conversations, it doesn't happen unless it's like me correcting a student saying, let's be nice here.
I think there are a lot of younger people that are headed into teaching and into education. And I see that there are more progressive views overall as people like move in, but I still think fat phobia is one of those that doesn't really, it's like a level of progressive that's really hit and miss. So I do have some colleagues that are very progressive in that way, where they're like, no body shame and like eat what you want, or you look amazing in that. And then others that still really have that like fat phobia ingrained in them. So it's interesting that generationally, I don't feel that it's like moving in that direction instead of like progressive in other ways, like socially progressive. I think we still have a long way to go with fat phobia.
That sort of speaks to my experience in schools as well, where I would say that a lot of our younger educators, especially as they come into the field, are really gung-ho on body positivity. But then some of those more internalized biases will come up, especially as we're talking about eating as it happens in front of kids and in front of colleagues. That's where I would most likely see that people maybe unintentionally undercut some of what they're vocally espousing.
So I don't interact with students in that way. Like where they eat, I don't see them. So for students, I don't consider that to be the type of relationship we have. I do have students in my lab who I again would never talk to them like seriously about it unless there was like a harm situation happening. But like if we go to lunch or something, I always make little like crack little things about myself. I'm like, well, I'm the big guy, so I'll take the rest or whatever. Like I talk about myself and how I'm comfortable with myself, but that's the extent of it. And then for colleagues, this is my anecdotal experience, but a lot of academic departments have a lot of thin people. There are not a lot of fat people in academic departments at universities. And so being bigger, you kind of do stick out like among my department. And no one has, I've like never ever experienced anything hostile in any way, fat phobic outwardly. But there are a lot of like assumptions made. So like if I'm walking with someone, we'll take the stairs and I'm like winded and going up the stairs, things like that, where it's just like not thought about. And campus is large and you have to walk across campus and I'm like barely keeping up and someone's trying to talk to me and I'm like, holy, we gotta take a break. You know, things like that where I'm like, it's just assumed that you're capable as a small, thin person is physically. So that I notice more and more as I grow. So I don't think there's ever been any like outwardly fat phobic anything like that. But we also don't really talk about it, but there are assumptions made.
You know, going back when you were talking about them, I'm like, huh, you're right. I think definitely I noticed in that span you were just talking, I'm like, from my time as a university student, I'm like, I think I'm fairly certain the bigger professors that I had were in the arts and humanities side of things as compared to the STEM and science side of things. So it was like my English, my history professors that were, so it was like the not academically physically active, like we don't associate English or history as like an active science as compared to you said you do like what, marine biology?
Yeah, so I don't know if, I mean, there is field work. So there is like ableist, you know, you have to be able to go into an intertidal rocky zone that's slippery and you have to be able to have balance. And so that like that kind of thing is you have to have the ability to do that. So that selects for a certain type of people, I think, who are like getting dirty and being very active in that kind of way. And so that can be a chat. Like I do not do field work. I send people out to do it for me because it's just dangerous. It's, you know, you can slip and break your leg on a rock and those rocky intertidals and it can be tough. So yeah, that's another aspect of it is field work, which I just don't do field work now.
You know, something I'm curious about for those of us that identify as gainers and feedies, you know, we often talk about fat discrimination when it comes to being hired. How, you know, wherever you guys have been in your gaining journeys, have you experienced any fat phobia, you know, regards being hired into a position? Like, and not that I think that you would be explicitly made aware of it, but things that you could like obviously infer it was for that reason.
I got hired during COVID and on a camera, I look thinner than I am. So like in this like headshot. So I can definitely see the reactions of being digital and then in person where I see like eyes widen because I'm bigger than I sometimes look from here up. So I have experienced that. I think that they legally know that they can't discriminate against me and they've already made the hiring choice. But I do question whether or not I would get that position, even though I'm very qualified, I'm very good at what I do. I think I sometimes wonder if I've missed out on opportunities because of that. It's definitely something that's crossed my mind.
Yeah, it's hard to know if you didn't get something, if that could be a factor. Like who knows? But in the places I've been hired, I don't think it has been a factor. I don't think they're paying attention to that really. There are problems with academic hiring in the university system overall, but like they really pay attention to your research and your teaching really, and how you do as a presenter, communicator. And so other than that, you know, I remember interviewing for this job and it was the first time I had really worn like dress clothes after gaining a substantial amount of weight. And so I felt very exposed, like my belly was kind of hanging over my waistband and that was the first time I had been in an interview setting where that was happening. And it was kind of exciting. I liked it, of course, but it was also, you know, I was like, are people going to notice this? And the answer is always not, they don't, if they do, they don't say anything. I think there's like a pre-gainer fear of people really paying attention to you in these settings and your weight. And I think people either don't care or at least don't bring it up. It's not something that happens to you when you're in those settings.
And there may be instances where it has happened to people, but again, it's like kind of hard to
How
prove
do you
and it
know?
would be a
Yeah.
bit nuanced. And like, again, like, you know, what if it's, because I'm still a little bit confused when it comes to charter schools. Like, it seems like you don't have to have any qualifications whatsoever. So it seems like if the CEO thought that you were good looking enough, they might just hire you based on that, you know. But I know that public school still has like things that they have to answer for.
I can talk to that from the charter perspective. It's a little different depending on the state, depending on the district, and depending on what your individual charter will allow. Where I've worked with charters and I've been with 3 different networks, it is pretty loosey-goosey in what will be allowed. However, I can also talk as a hiring manager currently, which is just that, look, the hiring pool is not super strong at the moment for educators. Obviously, with my own biases, sizeism wouldn't be a discriminatory factor I would lean towards. However, having discriminatory factors at all when your hiring pool is extremely limited, I just don't know how people would be able to justify that decision at this time when it's hard to get teachers in the classroom, period.
It's all very interesting to hear about, because frankly, I'm gonna just be honest about this. The most amount of insight I have into the educator's experience is watching episodes of Flabbott Elementary. You know, people do that thing where it's like, which Golden Girl are you? For me, like, which character from Flabbott Elementary are you? I'm very much a Shementi. Okay, like, I'm teaching them kids how to gamble, and I'm teaching them how to fucking like get away with some bullshit. Like that would be very much my approach in the classroom. But like, unfortunately, that's.
I mean, I'm right there with you. Like, I'm a nurse in the school, so like I'm confined to the clinic for the most part. But like I'm making friends with the teachers, and like especially the ones in which I have to go into their classrooms often. Like Richie, I know you're a sped teacher, and like my students are the sped students. Like in my school, I'm responsible for their healthcare and their well-being. You know, so like I'm getting to know how the world of education is run, and it's been interesting.
I have such a great relationship with my students, and they do talk about it. They talk about their feelings about their bodies and stuff with me, and and sometimes that puts me in a weird position because I don't like commenting on any of their bodies. I don't like to comment on students if they do anything to change their look or anything, even though I want to be affirming. Sometimes being affirming can embarrass them. So, I kind of like invite them in to have the conversations with me, and they're talking about it all the time. They're constantly aware of their bodies, like more so than I was when I was a teenager, and I was thinking about it all the time. There's a lot of stuff on like social media and just different diets and things like that they're always trying, or I don't understand how this person's thin because they eat like garbage and there's just a lot of misconceptions about food and weight and appearance and belonging that I have those conversations all the time with my students.
Yeah. In the middle school world, like that's when what you're talking about is starting to emerge. Like those viewpoints and those perspectives and that concept of self-image is just starting to emerge. And then we send them off to you guys to be like, have fun, good luck. So, I mean, a lot of it is like what I like to do is when I hear students doing student things, it's a lot of redirecting and saying, let's work on rephrasing that sentence right there. There's a lot of things I never thought I would have to say as a combination of words that I do say on a daily basis. So I get it.
Yeah, stop goon maxing the labubu and whatever the fuck kids are saying these days.
I was just going to say, like,
things.
I know that I'm old, and we all know that I'm old, but, like, I never feel older than when I hear these kids fire off with something like 6'7", or skibbity toilet, and I'm like, I don't know what the hell these kids are talking about.
I think that's good. I'm like, you guys can have your thing. I'm never going to be a part of it. It's not for me. I was like, that's fine. As long as it's appropriate for school, then that's all I care about.
Oh.
Yeah, Casey says here, we don't talk about gooning in front of the guests like the superintendent. Yeah, like that's I feel like that's good. That's good courtesy for the future. Like, I think if you get to work in a workspace where people talk about stuff, cool. But sometimes things are a liability, and that's real challenging. I will never forget being a teenager and like I don't know the conversations that other people were having, but just like teenage boys, disgusting, absolutely vile creatures. God damn. Ugh, the memories.
The thing is, boys, the big difference, and any of you correct me if I'm wrong, boys are just dumb. You correct them, and then it's over. They're done. Girls are vindictive and hold grudges.
Could we
Carry on
perhaps
with your
defer to
life.
Becca for this one? Is that correct in your experience, or would you like to challenge that at all?
I sometimes think that the boys are meaner. Like, I think that they kind of hang on to stuff. They need a lot more redirecting for me. And I think that the conversations I have to have with the boys are a lot more direct and a lot more, I have to explain it in multiple different ways. And I think a lot of girls are conditioned to just be quiet and agreeable, whereas like I get a lot more pushback from the boys. In my personal anecdotal experience. But
Yeah, Ty, I know you mentioned that in, higher ed, right, it's more professional, it's more respectful, there's protocol. But have you had to have any hard conversations about bodies or body image with anybody in your experience that stands out? Or do you feel pretty safe by the time, like, do you think things are kind of safer by the time you get to higher ed?
I think there's like rings of how close I am to certain students. And so
Sure.
like if someone was in my class, I barely speak to them unless they come find me like in office hours or things like that. So I really basically have no relationship with those students unless they make an effort to know me. And they are off, in their sororities and fraternities and who knows what body image stuff is happening over there. And but this college has a lot of counseling and a lot of centers to deal with student mental health because it's a huge crisis in young people everywhere.
Right.
And so that is a thing that I personally am not really involved in. However, if you have a student like a grad student who's on your committee or who's in my lab, then you get into a lot more personal stuff in all ways. You get a lot of students coming into your office and crying about something, and you have to have tissues ready and you're kind of a counselor in that way. I've never had one specifically about body image.
Mhm.
But I have had like romantic things with students and not me, I mean like them and stuff, conflicts with other advisors and stuff like that. So that I would say isn't impossible that a student would someday come to me and talk about something like that. I think possible, yes. Has it happened yet? No. And that would probably be more on the grad student level where feel more comfortable with you and are kind of more involved and personally know you better. With colleagues, I don't think, academics are pretty tight-lipped. So everyone's kind of got their own stresses that they hold tight and don't share at work, I feel like. So within colleagues, there are a few that I'm like friends with that maybe out of work we might talk about other more personal stuff, but at work that it doesn't really happen.
Yeah, that's good. It's good to have that side of the equation accounted for.
I do feel like we should ask probably an obvious question with an obvious answer, but this is why we have these conversations to put it out there onto the airwaves so that people understand that fantasy and reality are not the same thing. Tyler, you teach people who are of an age to consent to sexualized scenarios, but you are a teacher. How often do you do the gainer fantasy roleplay shit with students?
Never.
Never? But why? All the gainer porn says that it happens all the fucking time.
Yeah, and everybody who DMs me and finds out that I'm a professor, the first thing they say is, "Ooh, fat professor." Like,
I
the fat
forget about
professor.
how many gainer fantasies are set in college.
Yeah, I mean,
Yeah.
yes, in college students, and it's and not all of them. Some of them are 17, so not all of them are of age. But also, that's a no.
Thank you very much for answering that point. Once again, I feel like we have to ask that question, not
Oh, I
because...
should also mention. Let me say one more thing.
Go
In
for
this
it.
college town that I'm in, we have one gay bar, and it's 18 plus. And so all the well, if you want to go to the gay bar, it is a student bar. So luckily they have different levels. So the top level is kind of where the older bears side kind of hangs out. But you're surrounded by students in a gay bar setting, which is undertones or overtones of a sexual setting. And so you really have to have very strong boundaries and like not if you're going to go at all, which some professors I know do not go because it's too much.
Yeah, Casey is telling us this is a true nightmare, and I would agree.
Yeah.
Yeah, you kind of, I mean, you get used to in a college town, you're just around students all the time, so you kind of get used to it. It was kind of jarring when I first got here.
Well, running a high school, it's so interesting because I think there's a lot of pressure to model ideal behavior or whatever you envision ideal behavior to be. And I mean, like, I can think of responsible drinking as an adult, even as you mentioned, like being in a bar, but being around my high school students, that's just not even a conversation I wouldn't step into that willingly unless I absolutely had to. And it's so easy to avoid being in that scenario for me.
I've had a high school student use a fake ID, and I ran into them at a bar, and I was like, I know you're not 21. And I left like immediately. I just didn't want to be anywhere near that. But yeah, that's the only incidents I have with that. The students, otherwise, they'll talk about like going out and stuff, and it's just we're in two different worlds.
I have students at this point who are in their 30s, and it is still uncomfortable for me to see them as functioning adults because I will always think of them as high school sophomores.
That's so interesting that oh my gosh. But yeah, I mean, look, if you be framing that question, right, like it's an obvious question with an obvious answer. But once again, we come to the point of a lot of people will engage with this topic through the pure lens of fantasy because they hear a key word, professor, and their mind clues into the nutty professor, right? And they go, oh, I know how that movie turns out. Let me just toddle on down this path. And it's, I think, very important to remember that ironically, you used to apply this conversation to teachers when you were a student, because you see them at school and you only see them at school. And then because you live in your local town, you see a teacher in the wild and there's a part of you that goes, oh, yeah, you are like a full adult human who lives a life and you don't just like go into a cubbyhole at school and nap until school the next day. Like, it's remembering that people are far more than what we paint them to be. So the irony of that reflection, thinking about teachers in this context, let's also think about teachers in this context, right? Like, they are adult humans who, of course, can do all of the things, but we're talking about them in teacher mode, and so therefore we must remember that. And should any of you feel so inclined to either message these or other teachers you encounter in the gainer community, let's make sure that we keep those lines of conversation very clean and very clear, because we're not in the business of crossing any boundaries.
Speaking of boundaries, just really quickly, I have had students make a couple comments on my body in a sexual way, which is super, super uncomfortable. But especially because like I am Latina and there's some like connotations there as well. I worked in a school where students they're like, how come like all the Spanish teachers got fat asses? Like, and I was like, well, I was like, it was part of our interview process. And they're like, what? And I'm like, of course not. What are you talking about? You can't say that.
So they're using the trope of you being a thick Latina against you, perhaps. Oh, wow.
Yeah, I've gotten that before. And so it really depends. I've worked in public schools that are Title I public schools where students felt a little more comfortable commenting on my body. And then I've worked in other districts where like it doesn't happen as much. And so it is strange. But I have had like comments like that, like people talking about the size of my ass, or like if I'm kind of squeezing between aisles and it's like, yeah, I'm thick. So it is kind of awkward when that comes up, especially like students are minors, and it makes me incredibly uncomfortable. But I set really clear boundaries. I'm like, we don't talk about each other's bodies, and, you know, like, I'm not your friend. That disappointed a lot of students. They're like, I thought we were friends. And I said, absolutely not. I'm in my 30s. It's weird. You should never have a friend in your 30s. You're a teenager.
I tell my students, I'm like, I will be friendly, but we are not friends. Like, I will be nice to you, but do we hang out together outside of school? No. Do I want to hang out with you even here at school? Not really. And then I go on saying, I equally dislike all of you.
Yeah, you're all tied for last place in my heart.
Yeah. And then you can only go up from there. You can only go up from rock bottom.
I've had patients that thought that they were my friend. people that I've taken care of for 30, 60, 90 days, whatever. Oh, I thought we were friends. I'm like, no, you are the patient. I am a
That's
nurse. I have a
so.
professional boundary too. I'm not allowed to cross certain boundaries. Like, and if I do, we're talking about, license revocation, being fired, and potentially jail time. So like, I'm not trying to fuck with that.
But that's so interesting because, like, it kind of makes sense when the student doesn't understand that line because, like, they are still a child, right? They're still developing social skills, etc., and they just go, "Well, you're a human I see regularly, so maybe that's the relationship I'm developing here." So I can understand that, but like an elderly person is so interesting, and I do wonder.
Well, not
Okay,
necessarily. I should qualify that. I'm not necessarily talking about senior citizens I've taken care of because I've worked in various other capacities, and so like
sure,
some of the younger people who have been around my age, like I've taken care of people younger than me and people who were my age, and those were the ones that tried to get very buddy buddy with me, and I'm like,
sure.
no, that's not how
I'm
this is going to work.
regardless, I'm still qualifying here, right? Like, it makes sense in the education context. Like, a child's brain is not developed. Maybe they don't understand. Maybe they don't have enough real world experience to understand the difference between friend, acquaintance, colleague, etc. For someone who is of an adult age, I would find that surprising, perhaps, that in some kind of, power imbalanced context that they wouldn't necessarily understand that. Though I am curious to ask something because my aunt is an English teacher and she has been the forever cool teacher in her school because she's the teacher who doesn't give a fuck and she's a little bit mean to the students. And I wonder if there's correlation here. I remember once telling the story of like one of the kids who always got into fights and he decided to turn in some homework a couple of months late as a loose stack of papers and he goes, "Oh, miss, where do I file this?" And she held up the bin and said, "In the filing cabinet with the rest of your coursework." Like, that's very funny to me. And I feel like if I'd had a teacher like that, I would have been like, "Oh, you're a cool bitch. That's fantastic." Like, is there a correlation there in terms of, as you say, you have these firm boundaries, but that, like, there are instances where the kids go, "Oh, they have boundaries, they're being cool, therefore you're the cool teacher, and now I want to be your friend, or I want to connect with." Do you experience that, or do you witness that as a dynamic?
Yes, with all of my students, I know the students that I can like lightly roast and they enjoy it, and students that like that's completely off limits, it would embarrass them. And I get involved with clubs and stuff around campus where they're used to having regular conversations with me. I'm the leader of like two affinity groups on campus, the Latinx one. And also, our students invited me to be because we don't have a trans teacher at our school. So I also like supervise the trans and gender nonconforming affinity group. So we have like a lot of conversations that are not academic. And I think sometimes they just feel like because I joke around with them, because they tell me their stuff that we're friends. And I'm like, do I ever tell you about my personal problems? I don't. Like, that's not what a friendship is. But I was like, I love you and I care about you. So it is just kind of navigating that balance. Individual relationships, change. And some are more comfortable with me than others. A couple of my students just call me tia because like that's aunt in Spanish. And I was like, okay, like you can call me that, but there's still boundaries.
And to the boundaries thing, it's like I have because I very obviously am not straight. And so I work in a rural school ish, like a suburban rural area. And so I have a lot of the students asking me saying, "Hey, are you gay or are you in a relationship?" I'm like, state law prohibits me from answering that question. And I'm not, even if it didn't, I am not answering that question until you are graduated and you're over 18 and you are no longer in this district's public education system. I'm like, after that, when you're an adult, when you're at least 19 or 20, come back and find me. But like for now, off limits. Also, for the relationship, make an inference. Look at my hands. Make an inference. Put them skills to use.
I've had a slightly different experience. I've only worked in urban ed, and I've made it a pretty clear point of making sure that my queerness is visible for students so that they have some folks they can look up to and have some role models. But I did want to circle back for a second on the idea that we need to build those close relationships with students to know and navigate boundaries with individual kids. I know that the phrase building relationships is at this point becoming kind of a funny trope that we just expect that to solve all problems with behavior management with students, and it obviously won't. But one of the things that you were highlighting is that when you do have really strong relationships with your kids, you know what buttons you can push, you know where you can't, you know which kids are mature enough to handle play and light roasting, you know which students for whom that's just inappropriate and ineffective, and ultimately is going to be detrimental to the work that you need to do with their development.
So overall, how would you guys categorize your experiences as a plus-sized educator? I mean, have you experienced more highs than lows, or what's and how long have you guys been doing it? I don't remember if we all said, like, if you all said how long you've been doing the job.
This is my 11th year. I would say it really depends. There are more moments where I am aware of my body than others, especially like in a high school setting. If I'm in a meeting in someone else's classroom, like the desks are really snug and I can really feel my body, and I'm very aware of my body in those moments. I feel like I'm on display. Sometimes I had one incident. So my pants ripped and I was like writing on the board and like the back of my pants ripped and I didn't know. And I like heard some giggling, which like, of course, why wouldn't you? And it wasn't until like the end of the class, I had like a girl come and she was like, Profe, you have like a hole in your pants. And I was like, oh my God, thank you for telling me. But then I'm like, oh, are they going to think like I'm splitting my pants because I'm so fat? And, so there are times where I'm more self-conscious than others. And, being in front of the room, like standing there, all the attention's on you, writing on the board. Every time you turn around, I'm like, I don't know what they're saying. I don't know what their faces are doing. Sometimes it's easier than others. And I've gained a lot more confidence as I've gained more confidence in myself and my practice. But I would say, yeah, mostly like accommodations in a school. Like the school is smaller and it's made for smaller people. So sometimes I just feel very out of place in that way, in an accessibility context.
Okay, I have also split quite a number of pants, but that's from starting education as a 22-year-old with a pretty active eating disorder at 6'1", and then getting into a bodybuilding world. So yeah, I split a bunch of pants. The kids will lightly poke fun at that. And this is a place where I feel comfortable playing, which is more so like, hey, yeah, that's what happens when bodies get bigger. That's a natural consequence, to which they will say, well, why don't you just buy more pants? And the answer is, I need you to go yell at your legislators to fund education so Mr. Casey can buy new pants. Thank you. I'm going to go safety pin these now.
What about in the world of marine biology? Are there many opportunities to split your pants, Tyler? Has that happened to you very often? Or is it a wetsuit that you're splitting?
Yeah, the waders, the rubber waders, they do come in one size, which is not one size. So there is that. No, I've never split my pants. However, when I started in grad school and postdoc, I did some teaching in every level, and that was when I was thinner. And then since then, I've been teaching on the bigger side for 5-ish years and being here only 2 years. And this is a giant campus. And so walking from my car where I have to park to my office is like a new struggle with my shins and ankles that I am experiencing. So I'm having to get new shoes and stuff just to be able to get across campus because there's no parking that's close enough. So there's things like that are new phenomena for me on campus. But other than that, I mean, there's spaces where, like I said, there's like assumptions made. So taking the stairs, walking long distances instead of driving or something like that is like common and kind of expected. They're like, suck it up is kind of, no one says that, but I think that's what they would be annoyed to be having to accommodate something like that.
I'm in year 5 and thank the good Lord I have not split pants because, to Casey's point, Mama ain't got the money to constantly replenish her closet. So I'm very fortunate in that sense. Navigating, I mean, for all intents and purposes, I look fairly average. I mean, yeah, I've got a belly, but like it's not like a hindrance. The only hindrance, my God, is squatting, but that's just because I'm out of shape and I don't work out. But I played off, I usually do an exaggerated like, oh, sweet baby Jesus, or Jesus, Mary, and Joseph as I'm getting up or whatever, like to bring the humor to like take away from the, oh dear God, I'm struggling. And it usually works. Yeah, I mean, I haven't had any major or really even minor adverse issues because of my size.
One thing I'm also noticing is when like I don't use a laser pointer. I like to physically point. When I physically point, my stomach shows more. So I'm like having to buy longer clothes to shirts to teach in.
It's like that meme that's been coming up of that guy on the account where it's like, I'm this, but I'm fat. So it's like, I'm weightlifting, but I'm fat. And it's him like lifting weights, but constantly pulling his shirt down.
Or like he's shot in a drive-by and like he's already dead, but then he has to like pull the shirt down to cover his tummy and then go back to being dead. Like, yeah.
In my normal life, I wouldn't care. I don't care if my belly's exposed. That doesn't bother. I like that. But like,
Yeah.
in teaching setting, I'm like, I don't want my students like watching my body in that way.
Yeah.
Yeah, my partner also works in early childhood education, and let me just tell you that slacks are not meant to be sitting in crisscross applesauce.
Oh, yeah. I could imagine that would lead to some problems. Wow. Is the solution elastic pants then?
Yeah, stretch fabrics. Like stretch fabrics and the belief in God, I don't know. It's not great.
So the irony that they're trying to ban drag in schools, but the drag rule of four-way stretch is again probably going to be your best friend when it comes to clothing that you wear in schools as a fat educator.
There's a lot to be said for practical approaches, and oftentimes being in educational spaces is somewhat of an active pursuit. As such, the attire we wear should reflect that, right?
Oh, there was not a single day in the classroom where I didn't hit more than 12,000 steps in the same room.
My classroom is up like 3 flights of stairs, and then like we don't have an elevator, and the copier is like on the first floor. So I'm constantly like going up and down the stairs all day, and I'll do it. And I'll have like little middle schoolers or high schoolers like coming up the stairs to like come to my classroom, and they're like, and I was like, my fat ass can get up and down those stairs. I don't want to see you out of breath.
No, I think if I had to teach, I would be a diva and be like, no, a first floor classroom for me, please. Ground floor, actually.
Or you could be like me and be in a single story school with no stairs.
Well, I will say, Australian schools are usually single-story bungalows, like all fully detached. Like, that's how it operates. I think I once went to a friend had a sibling that went to a different high school and theirs had a second story. That was so fascinating to me. I was like, there are stairs. What do you do with all these stairs in this school? You're just climbing and going up and going down. What is in these second story classrooms? This is so fascinating.
Well, and you see, James, this is probably a functional thing because in my high school, we kept the middle schoolers in the basement, and that was for everybody else's protection.
Valid.
I don't know if this is something that non-educators know, but proximity is such a powerful tool in terms of behavior management. But that also means that you are just constantly on your feet walking around a classroom.
What does that mean? Like proximity as a power thing? Like, I mean, obviously, if it's a smaller classroom, like you keep them together, you can watch them. But are you talking tell me more? What do you mean by that?
Does one of the current classroom teachers want to take this one so I'm not admin-splaining?
I love that. That is rare on an admin side. I would love to have you as an administrator at my school.
Same.
It is
I'm hiring.
Like being actively a presence is behavior management. So like walking up and down the aisles, like checking in on students with group work. I'm constantly moving around. I hear 500 questions in a block. We do 80-minute blocks. I hear 500 questions and I'm constantly pulled in different directions. I'm on my feet all day. I'm very active at work. It's very physically demanding. But yeah, it keeps behavior in line, that you are an active presence and like, I'm seeing you and you can't, dump each other's backpacks out or, I'm here and I'm aware.
Yeah. And then in my world, so being in special ed, one of the things is co-teaching. So there's the two teachers. So I'm always like with my counterpart all day. So we are constantly like either one of us is always standing and circulating. And the other of us is either doing our small group or leading content. but one of us is always standing. We found out that if we carry our ISAP removal forms with us, also students are usually like, oh God, they're coming. One of them is coming over to me. I better get my act together. And for people who don't know, ISAP is just class removal in school suspension. And so we carry that around. But yeah, nonverbal like classroom management is huge. So I swear by my Under Armour shoes. Like, they are godsends. And stretchy pants, my jeans. I have multiple wash colors, so it's not looks like I'm wearing jeans, but I'm wearing jeans because they got stretch fabric, and I'm like, mama needs that.
Now, I do want to ask you a question. I'd mentioned Abbott Elementary before, and I feel like it is the most relevant piece regarding education in the zeitgeist. So I do just want to put it out there to the teachers among us. Like, who do you identify with in the show? Like, who are you in the Abbott Elementary cast?
Miss Shimenti.
Barbara.
That's my girl.
I feel violently seen by the character Jacob, and as also a white dude who went to primarily black schools as a teacher and Erica alum.
I want to be the principal, but I know I'm not. I probably miss Teagues. I'm the nerdy one who's excited to be there.
That's sweet. I like that. Now I need to know, from all of you all as teachers, who do you think the three of us are? Because I said I identify as a Shimenti. You may think of me as someone very, very different, but I'd love to know. Who are we?
Very respectfully, Jane. I can see you either as Mr. Johnson, the janitor, or Greg, or Gregory.
Gregory, okay, that's fine. I could stand to be a Gregory, that's fine. No, Tim's Mr. Johnson. I could have already told you Tim is Mr. Johnson. How dare you?
I knew it. You know, it's like, well, I was happy that you got Mr. Johnson for fucking once. Like, why do I always have to be...
Because you tell stories, okay? Like, also, when you talk about, because you love your silver screen divas, if you were teaching the children about silver screen divas, they'd be like, Mr. Scott's 1,000 years old. Like, he just talks about these people that are long since dead. Like...
It's called culture. Teaching you some theatricality.
I feel like Tim has at least a Barbara Rising.
Barbara Rising.
Your Abbott. What is your Abbott horoscope?
Well, that's
your
what James
Abbott's
is always
chart.
comparing me to. He's always saying that I'm Barbara, but like I don't know.
Well, no, it's because, like, if I'm Melissa, then you are definitely Barbara. Because, like, the two of them together, like, you can't fuck with the old bitches, you just can't be bothered. And that is very much the two of us together like that. I would argue, actually, Capy could be a good stand-in for Ava.
I might be the only person on this call who hasn't seen Abbott Elementary yet. So
you are literally disgusting and dead in my eyes. How very dare you? Get your education together.
Yeah, I'll nod and smile. Oh, Ava would say that. See? So
That is Ava.
The goods are there. Oh, goodness. But as our conversation draws to a close, I wanted to ask a question of our educators, kind of in reflection of our conversation. Looking to the future, what would you like to see change about how plus-sizedness is handled or addressed in your respective educational circles?
I think, having had this conversation, I think what is a commonality is it's often just not brought up or not spoken about. And so I don't necessarily want to be the one to take that charge where I'm like, we got to talk about plus size bodies in work, or, so having that administratively or structurally available as part of discussions about if we're going to do renovation of a building or anything like that, I think would be great.
Absolutely. I think too, just sort of, there's a lot of like policies in place that are supposed to be accommodating to different people and about discrimination. And I would really love to see fatness included in that instead of as a moral failing. And I would really love morality to like not be attached to fatness in our conversations. That would be my ideal world, but definitely accommodations. Like my school wanted me to buy shirts to wear, and like they only went up to an XL. And I was like, I wear like a 2X, 3X, I would like to be a part of this. And it feels weird to have me like scrunch into this for work. In my free time, yes, I'll do that, but not for work stuff.
For me, I want to see something like on the student side where like it's social emotional skills, like if we're all talking about mental health, because I know that's been brought up as well in this conversation, but like having those conversations as really starting, I would say, even in the elementary world, or but for sure in like the seventh, eighth grade world through high school, is like have those conversations of creating a holistic, positive, a positive self image. So, how do you do that? And that's including what your body looks like and feels like, and how to be positive in that. Because while it's not necessarily talked about adult to adult or colleague to colleague, I think we all agreed or can agree that it's for sure talked about student to student or students about students. And so self image and then being building up towards positive culture.
I think that folks in this sector as a whole are really skilling up at interrogating their own internal biases. However, I think that interrogating biases around fat phobia specifically is an area that we haven't caught up yet. And I would also really challenge school leaders to start thinking about that in the way that they structure their programs, their dress codes, handbooks, all these structural things that it's so easy to have your own biases bleed in if they're not paid careful attention to.
Y'all, I just want to say thank you so much for today's conversation. I think this has been really fun. And it's also been really informative. And again, I think important to really reframe the notion that fantasy is not reality and that there are deep conversations on what it means to talk around about fat, because for many of us, processing ideas of shame around our desire to grow, a lot of this starts in childhood, and a lot of this starts when we're in schools and we hear things from teachers, from fellow students. And so it's very interesting to hear a snapshot about the state of things, especially as it concerns people who are out there working as teachers and doing incredible things in this world. So thank you to each of you for being teachers, because frankly, you all do not get paid enough, you all don't get thanked enough, you all don't get given enough holidays. So at the very least here on Thicc Radio, allow us to say thank you for being fabulous. Thank you for everything you've contributed today. But now it is time to ask, where can the listeners find each of you online?
Don't find me. Honestly, I don't want students to find me or anything like that. But yeah, that's it. I'm in the wind.
Yeah, non-students can find me. I'm most active on Instagram at merrilyoverfed, but I'm on all the BlueSky and Grommr as well.
Well, again, non-students, please, for the love of God, I can be found at moanappetite on Instagram, Grommr.
Non-students can find me at caseystudy on BlueSky. Everybody else can find me screaming in your local woods.
I actually don't mind sharing mine if it's like non-students. I'm on Instagram at REBEC68R.
And any of their students, you can look up the rest of us. Maybe don't if you're underage. Please, don't come anywhere near us. But I mean, if you're of age, have questions, would like to know more, feel free to reach out to us at thethicradio@gmail.com if you have questions. And you know what? If you are someone who happens to be underage listening to this and is curious about the world of gaming, have some appreciation for the fact that there's something that you can listen to that provides some context and education for what you may or may not be experiencing right now. So in that case, go and listen to the back catalogue of episodes, and just do that until you become a legal age. Don't bother us otherwise. But I think that's a fine enough place to leave it for now here on Thicc Radio. Thank you everyone so much for your time today. Please remember to like and subscribe, rate us 5 stars, and leave us a good review. If you like this episode, the podcast, our guests, or just us in general, please share it with your friends and encourage them to tune in. You can find me on Instagram and BlueSky at stannnum.
And you can find me on Instagram at thiccymouse and Grommr at orpheus.
And you can find me on Instagram at thecaptainbara.
You can also find us on Instagram, YouTube, and TikTok at Thicc Radio, or visit our website at podpage.com/Thicc Radio. If you'd like to become a financial supporter of the show, you can donate through our PayPal, and you can always email us at thethicradio@gmail.com. So until next time. Bye, fats.
Bye, fats.
Bye,
fats.
Let's talk about it.
Thicc Radio is a Spotify podcast.
Artwork, media design, editing, and production by James Heinsohn.
With original theme music by CYMK.